Hi, I'm Jake Warner from the Penrith Solar Center and welcome to the PSC Solar Academy. In today's video, we are going to be learning the differences between a microinverter and a string inverter. Specifically, we're going to learn the advantages of a microinverter, but also the disadvantages of a microinverter. We're going to learn about the advantages of a string inverter and the disadvantages of a string inverter. And by the end of this video, you should be a little more educated about what is a better fit for you and your home or your business. Is it the Enphase microinverter or is it the humble string inverter? Let's take a look. Let's talk about the different types of architecture that a microinverter operates on and a string inverter operates on. Your solar panels generate in what we call DC energy, which is direct current. Now, the DC energy will go through a microinverter straight away and get changed to AC. This is what our homes use, and it's a far safer way of electricity traveling through your home than DC. The alternate to microinverters and AC architecture is that we have a DC string system. So what happens? Your panels all produce around 50 volts of DC each. They are plugged in together to go 50 volts, 100 volts, 150, 200, and so on and so forth, all the way up to the maximum potential of around 1,000 volts. So what exactly is a string inverter? Well, a string inverter is a really commonly used inverter in Australia. In fact, around 90% of total installs in Australia have string inverters on their walls. If you've ever been to someone's home and they've got a big blue box or a big white box or some noisy thing on the side of their wall and you can hear it, that's likely a string inverter. A string inverter will take all the panel's energy that they're producing and convert it to AC, which is usable in your home, and then your home will use the energy through the switchboard, and the current flows kind of like gravity. If you can think of it like gravity or water, it will flow to the point of least resistance, and that's how your home actually uses the energy. Any excess energy that you're not using will be sold to the grid for a feed-in tariff, unless of course you bolt on a battery, which we'll cover in another video. Now, an Enphase microinverter is actually somewhat similar. The difference is they're very hidden. So an Enphase microinverter is essentially decentralized. This is a microinverter. In fact, it's the new Enphase IQ8 AC microinverter. Now, the main difference between a string inverter and a microinverter, apart from the obvious, which is size, is that this puppy will sit under your panels for the life of the installation. In Australia, they have a 15-year warranty, and in America, they have a 25-year warranty. So we'll touch on that in another video. But how do these work, and why are they so much safer than string inverters? Well, it's pretty simple. Every single panel on your roof generates in DC. The DC is plugged straight into this microinverter, which at panel level converts the DC into AC, which is usable energy in your home. Now, why does this matter? Why is it so much safer? Well, the simple fact is that AC energy is safer than DC. It presents far less risks and it doesn't arc anywhere near like what a DC arc is. You should probably have a look on YouTube at DC arcs after this video. So your Enphase microinverter is pouched up under the panels and all the hard work is actually done on the roof. It's out of sight, out of mind. You'll never have a big ugly box or inverter or a noisy fan on the ground with an Enphase microinverter. So that's how Enphase works, and that's what the microinverter is. Now, what exactly are the advantages of an Enphase microinverter? Well, the advantages of an Enphase microinverter is really simply summarized in performance, reliability, and safety. So let's start with performance. Think of it like this. Having microinverters is like having 4 cars on a 4-lane highway. You have 1 car per lane. And if one car decides to brake or slow down for any reason, the other 3 cars aren't actually affected and they can continue on at full speed. The same is true for the generation of your microinverters and of your panels. Now, with a string inverter, it's like having 4 cars in 1 lane. If the front car slows down, then the other 3 cars are forced to go as slow as the front car. Bit annoying, and the same is actually true for how traditional string inverters work. If one panel is shaded, the other panels cannot possibly perform at 100% on a traditional string inverter. So that's a really, really good way to think about the differences between micro and string in the performance aspect. Let's talk reliability. Have you seen the video of me running this bad boy over with a forklift? You probably couldn't do that to any other inverter on the market. Good reason for it, and that's because of Enphase's potting mix, which is their absolute secret weapon inside this inverter, which makes it the most durable inverter in the world. What happens is the electronics, well, firstly, there's no moving parts. So no moving parts is a really, really important part to this equation. There's no moving parts, which equal heat, heat equals fatigue, and fatigue equals failure. But there is something more important than the moving parts aspect, which is the complete opposite. It's not a moving part, it's potting mix. The potting mix is a knoll resin, and it's filled inside this microinverter, and it sets like a hard rubber compound. And what it does is it actually dissipates the heat from the electronics out of the microinverter, and it also holds every single component tight inside the microinverter. The same is not true for any string inverter on the market. In fact, they're filled with the cheapest product in the world: air. Now you think about the origin in which your inverter is made. It could be China, it could be Europe, it could even be the USA. Now you think about the distance that it's traveled on a ship, well, ports to ship, to ports, to trucks, then loaded in the back of some installer's van or truck or ute, and then it's driven to your house. Now, that's a pretty bumpy ride. The potting mix ensures that not a single bit of stress or fracture is put on any of the electronics inside a microinverter. A string inverter, there are actually some pretty heavy components soldered to the PC boards of those string inverters. One of the advantages, of course, of the Enphase microinverter, and what most people think they're used for, is for, of course, shading. It is true that if one panel is shaded with an Enphase microinverter, the other panels on the site or on that roof face are not actually affected. So whilst this little microinverter takes a little kip under the shade, the rest are working at full pelt, which means they're going to be facing all different tilts and orientations. Now, why is this important? Well, it's important because you can quite literally put 1, 2, or 3 panels wherever you like, facing whichever tilt and orientation that you choose to have them at, and it will not affect the rest of the production on site. It is the only system in the world that can truly do this. Arguably, the biggest advantage of Enphase, in my opinion, is the enhanced safety. Did you know that an Enphase microinverter is in fact the only inverter in the world where you can turn it off at the board or at eye level down on the ground, and you truly get 0 volts coming from the roof to the ground? That is what makes Enphase microinverters so safe, as well as obviously their AC architecture, meaning we only have AC energy running through your home and not DC. One of the most important tools that you'll ever get when buying a solar system is the monitoring component of the solar system. It's usually used on an app, on your phone, a tablet, or your computer. And what the monitoring of this Enphase microinverter system gives you is second to none. You see, Enphase, not only will it give you what your system's producing as a whole, which most inverters do, to be fair, it'll also give you panel level data. So you can chime in on any day and see how each panel's performing independently. It is the most transparent solar monitoring platform in the world, and there's a good reason for it. Every single Enphase system at Penrith Solar Center comes with consumption monitoring, and that is one of the biggest advantages of doing an Enphase system. The last advantage that I have for today's session on advantages of Enphase is, of course, expansion and future proofing. Enphase is one of the only systems in the world where you can truly go to it and add one more microinverter or panel if you really choose to do so. You see, most alternatives to Enphase are actually designed to their full capacity to start with, and that's so you can get best value for money at the time of installation. It often means that the inverter is completely tapped out and there is no more room to expand on that inverter. So when you go to add 1 or 2 more panels, A, it probably won't be possible because no string inverter will accept 1 or 2 panels. And B, it'll actually cost a lot of money because you'll have to bolt a second inverter to the home. With Enphase, what you spent up front already is going to pay dividends when you can simply just add 1 or 2 more panels and 1 or 2 more microinverters. Along with being able to add any amount of extra panels and micros that you like, the Enphase system is also ready for a whole suite of batteries, including of course the Enphase IP5 home battery, the Tesla Powerwall, and almost any other AC coupled battery on the market. So I've told you about all the advantages of the beloved Enphase microinverter, but what are the disadvantages of a product like this? Well, the biggest one that we get pushback on is of course price. A microinverter system will cost somewhere between 20 to 30% more than a traditional string or optimized solution. Now, what does that actually mean for you? Well, microinverters will perform better, so your money will come back more times over its lifespan and it lasts longer, so your money will come back more times there as well, but it definitely costs more up front, which means initially your payback period's going to be slightly longer. Some people will promise you that a really cheap system can pay itself off between 2 to 2.5 years, sometimes maybe 3. At Penrith Solar, we see our Enphase systems paying themselves off very commonly between really high 3 years for commercial and then residential in between 4 to 5.5 years, depending on the complex of your installation. The last disadvantage that we're going to speak about today, which could actually be an advantage for some, but a disadvantage for others, is manufacturer dependence. If you're installing Enphase microinverters, you must install genuine Enphase trunking cable, a genuine Enphase envoy, relays, as well as end caps and end plugs. Now, is it a disadvantage that you have to stick to the same brand, or is it an advantage that you're using quality products to match your quality microinverters that is going to stand the test of time? I'll let you be the decision maker of that one. What exactly is a string inverter? Well, put quite simply, a string inverter is the first generation of solar that anyone ever installed, and some people still currently install today. A string inverter is what we call DC architecture, where the DC comes down from your solar panels, through the walls of your home, connects into the string inverter. The inverter works really, really hard to convert that DC to AC energy, which is usable in our home, of course, and then sends it off to your home to be used. That's a string inverter in a nutshell. So what exactly are the advantages of a string inverter? Well, one of the biggest advantages on a string inverter is in fact that most of them have a screen on the front of them. Now, whilst you think, why is that an advantage? It is actually awfully convenient to walk up to your string inverter, push a little button and see what it's currently producing. It also will have a little light on it, and if it's green, it means it's working. That is certainly an advantage of a string inverter that microinverters don't actually have. Another advantage of the string inverter, and probably the biggest advantage for most people, is cost. String inverters cost anywhere from 20 to 30, sometimes even 40% less than a microinverter system. One of the other advantages of a string inverter, which isn't really a problem for homeowners, but more to do with installers, is the installation. String inverters are faster to install than microinverter systems. And what that means is sometimes your string inverter installer can get 2 done in 1 day. With other types of technology, that's not actually a possibility at all. So string inverter systems can be installed faster, and they also can be more readily accessible if you ever have to fix it in the future. You see, they're usually installed at eye height next to your switchboard or in your garage, so you do have it at arm's touch. The last advantage of most string inverter systems is compatibility. You see, you can take almost any brand of string inverter and mix it with any brand of panel and any brand of DC cable and any brand of DC isolator to get your end solution pending on your budget. So string inverters are seen to be more compatible to different types of products and sometimes even more compatible to different types of batteries. Okay, now what are the disadvantages of a string system? Well, I've got a long list of disadvantages of a string system, and it formed part of my decision that I made when I moved Penrith Solar Center to a 100% microinverter only company. Now, here are some of the disadvantages of a string system. The biggest one, in my opinion, is safety. All too often at Penrith Solar, we get called out to house fires, isolator fires, inverter fires, and they all have something to do with the system being a string system. Now, it's not really fair to say that it's always the inverter's fault, because usually it actually isn't the inverter's fault. Inherently, when you install a DC string system, there are a lot of cheap inferior components that get bolted to that system, which in electrical terms we call BOS, or balance of system, which form part of your solar system. For example, the type of cable that runs from the inverter to the roof. You know it's not genuine string inverter cable. Like, what actually is this cable? I bet you probably can't even get the brand of it out of your installer's mouth, because they won't actually know. MC4 plugs are one of the next biggest failure points, as well as DC isolators. Now, in recent times, there's a new rule that's come in that says DC isolators no longer have to be on the roof of your home. And that's a really, really good move, but it doesn't apply to every home and every situation. And the real kicker is that although they've been taken off the roof, you still need them down on the ground next to the inverter or built in the inverter. And it is one of the biggest failure points that we see, causing arcs, which ultimately lead to DC fire. Another big problem with string inverters is that they are one big, giant, beautiful central point of failure. Now, if you think that an inverter will fail and your solar installer will magically appear the next day with a brand new one, you are very, very mistaken. You see, the cycle to have a string inverter replaced looks a little something like this. Firstly, you've got to work out that your string inverter has actually failed. Your installer will not proactively tell you this, because they won't actually know in most cases. So you work out your inverter's failed. How do you work it out? If you're a proactive homeowner, you might go out and look at your inverter every now and then. You might look at your inverter's app, or you might be the poor person who waits for their power bills to come in and gets an absolute shock of a lifetime. Let's just assume it only takes you 1 week to work out that your inverter has actually failed, which is pretty optimistic in my opinion. The second stage of this is you've got to call your installer who installed the product to come out and actually diagnose the problem, because surprise, surprise, we don't actually know if it's the inverter, the panels, the cabling in between, or anything else to do with your solar system. So they'll come out, they'll diagnose the inverter. To be fair, it's a really, really quick and easy process. They'll pull the DC leads out of the inverter, they'll test that there's DC, they'll also test that there's an AC connection. Usually if you have the DC connection from the panels and the AC connection from the board, the inverter is somewhat fried. Now, what components fried? It could be a number of things. It could be a power stack, it could be a comms card, it could be the PC board, the fans could have failed in the inverter, causing it to overheat. There are a number of reasons why your string inverter could have failed. A good technician and a good solar installer will actually work it out pretty quickly. Give them a couple of hours and I'm sure they'll know what the problem is. But that's not the actual problem. The problem is that they've then got to go back to the office and they've got to lodge a warranty claim. Now, string inverter manufacturers aren't particularly known for their after-sales service. A warranty claim with a manufacturer of a string inverter optimistically could take anywhere from 1 week all the way out to 4 to 5 weeks. Now, that inverter is going to get shipped. A lot of the time it is actually a refurbed unit and not a brand new unit. The installer will then get the unit, they'll ring you and say, hey, great news, I've got your inverter in stock, when can I come out and get it? Let's say that takes another 1 week for them to get out. They come to site, they install the inverter, they do all the testing, which takes them a couple more hours, they turn it back on and voila, you're back up online. And you think, well, Jake, that doesn't actually sound that bad. But in the meantime, your solar system's just been off for anywhere from 3 to 6 or maybe 7 weeks. What does 3 to 6 to maybe 7 weeks look in terms of energy losses and what that has actually just cost your family in energy? The logic is the bigger the system, the bigger it's actually going to cost you out of pocket. 6 weeks is half of your bill cycle if you get billed quarterly. So think about that as one of the biggest disadvantages of all time for a central string inverter. For as long as I can remember in the solar industry, we have always known string inverters to not perform in shaded conditions. Now, I am somewhat pleased to report that this isn't 100% true anymore. However, we're not talking about all string inverters. We're actually only talking about two, sadly. So there are two string inverters that don't have this as a downside. But for the rest of the hundreds of inverters on the market, this is certainly one of the biggest downsides of a string inverter. And that is that shading affects every single panel. So if you have a 3 kilowatt system and it's on one string, think of your panels wired in series, so dot, 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 and then back down to the inverter. If one of those panels is shaded, quite simply put, the rest of the panels will only perform as good as the weakest link. If you have a dual tracker inverter, which means it has two inputs, the panel on the first string, if it's shaded, will not actually affect the second string. However, this solution will never keep up with the algorithms and the distributed architecture of a beautiful Enphase microinverter system. The next downside of a string inverter is in fact safety. Now, the problem with what I'm about to talk about is it's not actually got to do with any specific brand of inverter, a string inverter that is. It has to do with the simple architecture that is DC architecture. When you have DC coming through your roof, down your walls and into your string inverter, it is just quite simply put not the safest way to do things. In fact, there is a rule in the solar and electrical standards which say that you cannot run a DC cable within 600 mil of your ceiling space in your home. The reason for that is if your home is on fire, touch wood, that the firefighters need to come in and be able to hook your ceiling without hooking a DC cable. The same rule does not actually apply to an AC cable on a microinverter system. Think about that. Have you ever been to the RAF base and heard one of those huge Hercules jets landing? I'm sure you can picture what I'm talking about. Well, that is the same for in the middle of summer with a string inverter screaming off its nut doing 100% output. It's irritating, it's noisy, it's annoying, and you wouldn't want to be a shift worker and have a string inverter bolted to the side of your home. You see, string inverters, most of them have fans, some of them up to 3 fans inside of them, and inherently they're really, really noisy. For years now, there's been ongoing jokes on solar pages that every time you buy a string inverter, we'll give you a free pair of earmuffs. And let me tell you, it is actually no joke. String inverter warranties are dismal at best. Most of them are only 5 years, and they'll tell you that you can have a 5+5 warranty. Woohoo! The second 5 years of a 5+5 warranty doesn't even cover the labor to actually fix your inverter. So the first 5 years is commonly parts and labor. The second 5 years is parts only. That is going to set you back a pretty penny. Now, a 10-year warranty for an all-round warranty with a string inverter is actually becoming more common, which is a good thing, but it's still nowhere near the 15 years of a microinverter system, which is expandable to 25. Important considerations to remember when you're choosing an Enphase microinverter system or a string inverter system. And these are, of course, the following. The most important thing when buying solar is choosing a great, reliable, reputable local installer who's going to be here to stand the test of time and be able to grow your system with you in the future when you might need batteries, electric vehicle charging, or even a solar system service. The second most important thing to consider is, of course, your inverter. Whether you choose a string inverter or a microinverter is totally up to you. The third most important thing to consider is the panels that you're installing on your roof. Now, my point of saying this is that choosing the right style and type of microinverter is actually a really, really important decision. So why would you choose string and why would you choose micros? I hope you've learned a little bit more after watching this video and reading this article on whether string inverters or microinverters are best for you and your family.